My stepbrother was adamant that I should leave the house during my stepfather's burial, thinking it was his right to decide. Until the will showed a different story. 38-year-old John never thought he'd be preparing for his stepfather's burial. As I sift through old pictures and make plans, memories crash over me like a tidal wave. When faced with death, it's common to reflect on a lifetime filled with both highs and lows. When I was 9, my mom, Linda, tied the knot with David, my stepdad. It feels like just yesterday that the wedding day happened. Mom totally rocked her simple white outfit, with hope shining in her eyes for a new beginning. David, in contrast, appeared to emphasize his serious demeanor by donning a black suit. Even during what should have been a joyful moment, he maintained a serious attitude that I would eventually become all too familiar with over time. David was a strict dude from the get-go. Especially when he turned to look at me, he always had this constant frown on his face. I often wondered if he genuinely connected with a kid who wasn't his, or if he secretly resented stepping into the role of a stepdad. Growing up with David was quite the challenge. He criticized everything about me, from my grades to my wardrobe, and even the way I used my fork at meals. You gotta put in the effort, or this harsh reality will just grind you down and toss you aside, he would say nearly every day. Reflecting on it, I can't help but think that Dad was trying to prepare me for life in his own imperfect way. Even though I thought he was just being a jerk back then, his inflexibility seeped into every aspect of our existence. During family gatherings, I had to maintain perfect posture, use the right utensils, and only chime in when invited to speak. Any deviation from what he anticipated was met with a piercing glare or a sharp reprimand. Family vacations, which should have been fun and relaxing, felt more like a series of intense missions than enjoyable getaways. David had a knack for planning every detail to the minute, and woe betide anyone who dared to deviate from the agenda. There was this one vacation where we totally missed a turn and ended up getting to a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day, David was in a foul mood, complaining about wasted time and poor planning. Everything shifted 3 years after the wedding when my stepbrother Tom came into the picture. Out of nowhere, David found himself with a son, and it was pretty obvious who the favorite was. He showered Tom with affection and praise. David's smile was something else entirely when he cradled his newborn kid. It uncovered a side of David I had never seen before, as if a light had been flipped on. I felt a mix of jealousy and anger. At 12, it was baffling to me how Tom seemed to soak up all the affection and praise, while I was met with nothing but cold stares and judgment. The contrast was evident and painful. Tom's achievements, no matter how small, were celebrated with a lot of enthusiasm. Even when I achieved something noteworthy, my accomplishments were met with a simple nod and a comment about how I could do better next time. Mom would attempt to calm me down when I complained about the unfair treatment, saying, "David loves you too, John," her eyes pleading for me to get it. That's just tough love. He's all about getting you prepped for what's out there. Honestly, it just didn't seem like love to me. It felt like a never-ending cycle of letdowns as David watched me constantly miss the mark. Over the years, our family dynamics shifted in ways I could never have anticipated. When Mom got sick at 25, we all came together to support her. David kept his cool, but I could tell he had a soft side when he thought no one was watching. When my mom thought I wasn't around, I would watch him gently fluff her pillows or hold her hand with care. For the first time, I realized that David's emotional distance might stem more from his own limitations than from how he felt about us. 2 years later, my mom passed away, and it felt like the glue that held our family together had shattered. The funeral was marked by tears and hushed prayers. David was like a statue during the entire service, his expression completely unreadable. Even though the barrier felt impossible to overcome, I felt the urge to reach out to him and share our grief. So, at 21, Tom dipped out not long after Mom passed away. He started his own family after marrying Sophia, his high school sweetheart. It was just David and me in that huge, large house filled with memories all of a sudden. I've been thinking about moving out too, but there's just something that's stopping me. Maybe it was a sense of duty, or maybe I was still that little kid inside, hoping for some sign of validation from the man who had been my father figure for so long. Caring for David in his later years was quite a challenge. Despite the limitations of his aging body, he remained as determined and sharp as ever. There were times when our disagreement was so intense, it felt like you could slice right through it. but sometimes I caught glimpses of gratitude flickering in his eyes. Remember that time I pulled an all-nighter with him during a rough patch? Or when I figured out how to whip up his favorite meals as he got too weak to cook for himself? Those were rare occurrences, and most of the time, it felt like I was just taking care of someone I didn't really know who happened to share my space. We were stuck in this awkward standoff, both of us feeling the weight of the gap that had grown between us over time, unsure of how to bridge it. David's character totally turned me off from the idea of relationships or marriage. I didn't want to deal with any of the same problems I was facing with my wife or girlfriend. David has passed away at 65, unexpectedly taken from us in the evening due to a heart attack. People are coming together to pay their respects as I prepare for the burial. Tom showed up with Sophia and their little ones, Lily, who's 5, and Max, who's just 3. It had been ages since I last saw him, but here we are now. Even though he comes off as older and more serious now, I remember back in the day he always had this air of entitlement about him. The funeral was a real downer. I was there, soaking in the conversations about David, an incredible guy who prioritized family above all, a true community cornerstone, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of it all. Did they know the same guy I did? The David they talked about felt like someone I didn't even know. Tom pulled me aside as everyone was leaving after it wrapped up. I thought maybe he wanted us to help each other through our sadness, to reconnect, or to reminisce about our childhood memories. Instead, he landed a shocking hit that had me spinning. So, regarding the house he mentioned, his voice was so chill, it felt like we were just chatting about the weather. You gotta be out by the end of the month. I caught a quick look at him, but I'm not really sure. What are you even saying? He let out a groan and shot me a deliberately vague look. Obviously the house. My dad handed it off to me. At the end of the day, I am truly his son. Did you really think he would hand it over to you? I felt like I had been completely wrecked. This is what it all came down to after all those years of trying to be the son David wanted and taking care of him. There was a part of me that really wanted to stand up for what I believed I had worked hard for through years of careful living. Yet there's this other part of me, the one that still feels like that 9-year-old kid craving validation, that just wants to pull back. Sure, I replied, my tone flat. I'm planning to be out by the end of the month. It's not just about David. It's for the family I always wished I had. I longed for a connection with David that never materialized, especially as I saw Tom stroll away with his arm around Sophia, the kids dashing ahead of them. That evening, I started sorting through boxes filled with memories, unsure if I really wanted to keep any of them. As I sifted through years of stuff, I found myself questioning if David had actually been onto something all this time. Sometimes, despite all the effort, you find yourself with nothing to show for it. The world was unforgiving. Just a quick update. I sold my family home last week. Right now, my Aunt Sarah is hanging out with me as we figure out our next move. Reflecting on Tom and the journey that brought us to this point, I find myself lying awake at night, gazing up at the unfamiliar ceiling. It's pretty clear that Tom was the favorite in the family during his childhood. David showered him with attention in a way that was never directed at me from the moment he arrived, throwing birthday parties with all his friends, gifting new toys for no reason at all, and beaming with pride when he brought home a good report card. Everything I had yearned for but never experienced. I remember this one birthday when Tom was about 8 years old. David rented out an entire arcade for him and his friends to enjoy. Back then I was 17 and couldn't help but compare it to my own birthdays, which usually involved a low-key dinner and maybe a little present. But Tom got older and things shifted. The adorable kid who used to trail behind me, eager to play, has turned into a moody teenager who seems to despise everything and everyone around him. He began acting like I didn't even exist and would snap at our parents. It felt as if someone completely unfamiliar had taken over my little brother's body. I remember this one time when he was about 16 years old. So David brought up his grades while we were all sitting down for dinner. David was always throwing this kind of question our way. It was just an ordinary one. Tom totally lost it this time, though. He started yelling about how much he hated being under David's thumb and how tired he was of the constant pressure. He dashed out of the house, slamming the door with such force that a picture tumbled off the wall. David was just sitting there, appearing older and more melancholic than I had ever noticed before. Instead of the furious guy I expected to chase after Tom and haul him back, Tom's behavior has only gotten worse with age. He started dating a bunch of girls, but each relationship ended in a messy way. Late nights, broken curfews, and epic shouting matches with David that shook the house are everywhere. I really wanted to stay out of it, but the constant stress just kept creeping in and getting to me. Tom just brushed it off when David brought up respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and David would wear this look, a blend of anger and hopelessness that I had never witnessed before. And so the day came when he showed up with Sophia by his side as his wife. None of us had any idea he was in a serious relationship, much less planning to get married. Strolling in with Sophia, who was barely more than a teenager, he casually mentioned that they had eloped. I'll always remember the look on David's face. For once, he didn't say a word. Mom attempted to ease the tension and embrace Sophia as part of the family, but you could definitely feel the charged atmosphere. David looked like he was really trying hard to stay calm and figure out the right things to say to his kid. Sophia said she wanted to break free from her family's interference and live independently. So Tom just packed his bags and took off. No big deal. He promised to visit and stay connected, but those promises quickly faded away. Months dragged on without a word from him. His calls were always brief and frequently laced with tension. I really thought he would show up when Mom got sick, but he didn't. He checked in on her from time to time, but there was always some excuse for why he couldn't drop by. Man, what a day. Work was all over the place, the kids caught something, and the car decided it needed a spa day at the shop. There was always something lurking in the background. I was really hoping it would be Tom. I remember sitting next to my mom's hospital bed, and her eyes would light up every time the phone rang. More often than not, it really wasn't. I was the one who had to call Mom to tell her that she passed away. He seemed really hurt, clearly wishing he had come around more often. He said he would try to make it to the funeral, but in the end, he didn't show up. Instead, there was just a flower arrangement sent to the funeral home with a card expressing his condolences. Feeling his absence like a deep ache, I stood at the gravesite, questioning how we had drifted so far from each other. And here we are at this moment. The wayward son comes back, not out of love or duty, but for his own benefit. It's infuriating to think about how he just came in and took the house, acting like he had any claim to it after abandoning us all those years ago. I think back on all those evenings I dedicated to David, the doctor's appointments I went to, the meals I prepared, and the costs I covered. Seriously, what's the point? Is it really possible to be discarded, as if I never mattered in the first place? But my phone rings while I'm overwhelmed by these awful thoughts. It's Mr. Davis, the lawyer for David. He says he needs to discuss something important, sounding really serious, and requests that I return to the house tomorrow. Feeling a bit lost on what to trust. I can't help but wish there's some kind of error, and maybe I won't end up losing my home after all. Given my past disappointments, there's a part of me that's really scared to get my hopes up again. I'm curious about what tomorrow has in store as I end the call. No matter what, I've got one thing figured out. This is going to be a challenge. I can't seem to settle down for the rest of the night, my mind racing with endless possibilities. It was something so important that Mr. Davis needed to meet with me face to face. So it turns out David actually left something for me after all. Is it even possible? Is this just another letdown in a series of disappointments? It was surreal standing in front of my family home the next day, feeling like a total outsider. To my surprise, Tom's car was already parked in the driveway. With a deep breath, I stepped inside. The well-known creak of the front door sent a jolt through me. At the dining room table, Mr. Davis was surrounded by a mountain of documents. Tom and Sophia were there too, looking pretty worked up. With an expression that gave nothing away, the attorney gestured for me to take a seat. Seated and fully aware of the palpable tension in the room, he expressed his gratitude for everyone's presence with a firm, businesslike tone. I get that this is a rough time, but we really need to discuss some important points regarding David's will. Tom leaned in, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Time to bring this to a close. I'm eager to get started immediately because I have some exciting plans for this place. Mr. Davis cleared his throat, looking a bit uneasy. We definitely need to discuss that, so David's will clearly says that John gets the house and all of David's stuff. Pretty straightforward, right? Everything fell silent for a moment. I seriously felt like I was suffocating. I should have listened to him more carefully. All those years spent feeling inadequate, and now David has entrusted everything to me. Tom was the first to jump in. "What?" he shouted, springing up so quickly that his chair toppled over behind him. "There's no way that's happening. I am the true son of my father. He wasn't about to just give everything to John." Mr. Davis kept his composure despite Tom's fury. "I'm kind of concerned that it's pretty clear. So, David's will clearly states that John gets everything, like the house, his savings, and all his personal stuff." What I was hearing was absolutely unbelievable. It just didn't make any sense. After all those years of being criticized and feeling like I could never quite meet expectations, here I am now. Tom was pacing back and forth, his face burning with anger. This is absolutely insane. He must have been totally out of his mind when he put this together. I'm going to challenge this and take it to court. Mr. Davis shook his head. "I wouldn't recommend that approach." David put a lot of thought into crafting this will. He wrote a letter explaining his decision and had it officially signed and notarized. It's going to be pretty tough to challenge effectively. Tom turned to me, his eyes burning with anger. "You did this, right? Did you really manage to turn him against me?" "Honestly, I can't wrap my head around it. I just threw my hands up. I was completely in the dark about all of this. I thought he was passing everything along to you." Just when the situation was about to escalate, Mr. Davis jumped in to intervene. I believe David's letter could shed some light on his decision. He pulled out an envelope and began to read it. "Hey, sons, if you're seeing this, I'm no longer around. I get that my choice might come off as surprising to you two, but I hope I can clear things up a bit. I've definitely messed up a bunch throughout my life. One of my biggest mistakes was not giving equal attention to both of my loves. I had high hopes for John. Maybe I was asking for too much, and I didn't express enough love. I was way too nice to Tom. I totally failed to establish any boundaries or share anything meaningful. Reflecting on my life in my later years, I realized something important. A true son is characterized by actions, not just by lineage. In that regard, John really stepped up and acted like a true son should. He stuck by my side during tough times and took care of me, even when I really didn't earn it. He displayed all the qualities I tried to teach but couldn't demonstrate myself: patience, kindness, and responsibility. I'm totally handing everything over to him, not to punish Tom, but as a nod to the kid who truly represents the values I hold dear. I really hope you both can find it in your hearts to understand and forgive the mistakes of an older dude." The atmosphere shifted dramatically as Mr. Davis snapped his book shut. Emotions overwhelmed me, a flood of feelings surging from deep within. For so long, I believed David just didn't give a damn, that I was nothing but a letdown to him. Yet, he had been watching, recording, and appreciating in his own distinct way. Tom stood still for a second, his expression a blend of disbelief and fury. He quickly grabbed Sophia's hand, bolted out, and slammed the door shut behind them. His car fired up and zoomed out of the driveway. The final act of rebellion was marked by the sound of tires screeching. Mr. Davis turned to me with a soft smile on his face. "Hey, John, I get that this might be a lot to take in." David laid out his preferences with impressive clarity. He hoped you'd have a future where money worries are a thing of the past. I nodded, feeling a bit lost about what had just happened. "Thanks, I was able to get that out. I'm going to take a moment to think this over." Mr. Davis paused, taking a moment to meticulously fold his documents with care. "Oh, and there's one last thing. Your stepdad also left you a personal note." "So, you checked it out on your own, huh?" he asked. He handed me an envelope, and I could instantly tell it was from David by his distinct handwriting and on the front, clearly marking it as mine. I embraced it, fully aware that the words we exchanged were ones I had longed to hear for what felt like an eternity, my hands trembling in anticipation. I was alone in the stillness of the house, turning the envelope over and over in my hands after Mr. Davis left. Finally, I mustered the courage to crack it open and dive in. "Hey, John, I know I'm not the best at expressing how I feel, but I hope this letter can make up for some of my shortcomings. I'm really impressed with the person you've become. I struggled as a parent, shaped by a tough upbringing that left me without the tools to show proper affection. I figured that the most effective way to prepare you for life was to be tough and push you to your limits. I feel bad about the pain I put you through. I've come to realize I was wrong. Especially over the past few years, your kindness and dedication have really illustrated what true strength and integrity are all about. You totally embody the person I always hoped you would become. I'm sorry for not sharing these things with you while I was around. With this letter and my final wishes, I hope you find some peace and protection. Don't forget who you are, kid. You totally deserve all the happiness out there. Absolutely adore David. I couldn't help but let the tears fall as I finished the last page of the book. After all those years of feeling like I wasn't enough, believing David didn't give a damn, this was just too much to handle. In the days that followed, I struggled to wrap my head around it all. The house, once a source of anxiety and unpleasant recollections, now had a different vibe. It was mine, not just in a legal sense, but on a much deeper level. It was a clear sign of David's feelings, genuine but perhaps a bit overdue. It's been radio silence from Tom ever since he left that day. It's hard to say if he will or not. Even though I get that it's going to be a process, I can't help but wish we might find a way to make things right in the future. The hurt is still fresh, and the gap between us feels wider than it did in the past. I've really pondered the intricacies of family, love, and the countless ways individuals express it. Even if it came off as tough, David's affection was genuine. It had its shortcomings. In his own way, he was preparing me for life and helping me develop my resilience. While I would have preferred if he had taken a gentler road, I have a clearer perspective on him now. When it comes to inheritance, it's not just about the cash and property. With great power comes great responsibility. David had faith in me to carry on his legacy and embody the values he cherished. Even though it's a tough gig, I'm determined to rise to the occasion. I decided to set up a scholarship fund in David's name using part of the bequest. It's aimed at kids facing tough circumstances, giving them the education and opportunities they might not otherwise get. It feels right to take what he taught me and share it with others as a way to keep his memory alive. I'm just sitting here trying to wrap my head around it all, and this house that somehow became mine out of the blue. Father-son relationships can be really complicated, often filled with unspoken emotions and a lot of misunderstandings. David and I never had the connection I hoped for while he was alive, but his final gesture has opened a door for me to understand him more deeply, revealing the love that was always present, just beneath the surface. I really wish my dad had shared these things with me while he was still around. We could have had discussions, sorted things out, and maybe even built the connection I longed for. Life doesn't always wrap things up neatly or give us perfect conclusions. At this moment, I'm focused on honoring David's memory by embodying the principles he aimed to instill in me. Put in the effort, stay diligent, and above all, cherish the people who truly count. I'm really stoked to be continuing a legacy. As I think about the future, I feel a mix of emotions. There's sadness for what I've lost, gratitude for what I currently have, and a sense of hope for what's on the horizon. David's surprising legacy has really opened my eyes to the importance of family, love, and forgiveness, all while providing some financial security. I never saw this coming, but here I am stepping into a new chapter of my life. I'm ready to tackle whatever comes my way, carrying the lessons I've learned and holding on to hope for a brighter future. That could very well be the ultimate legacy. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to keep up with more unbelievable real-life stories unfolding right around you.